Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Thursday. Today's the 20th of August. This is Let's Talk Tropics. Things across parts of the Atlantic starting to look a little bit busy, or at least on the satellite imagery. And we do have a handful of global models that are trying to get some action going here in about a week to 10 days. Nothing in the near-term future, so don't be surprised when you see the National Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlook that we have here later on. As far as our skies here locally, we've got a lot of sunshine. Gradually, we'll start to see some clouds mixing in. Could be a couple of thunderstorms later this afternoon. I'd be on the outlook for that, especially in the parishes that border the Atchafalaya Basin. That's going to be the best chance for any showers. And watch out, too, because if one of these really starts to feed into the unstable atmosphere that's there, they can get pretty strong in a short period of time. But the problem with all the instability we have up there, we don't have any triggering mechanisms. We don't have any fronts. We don't have any upper level troughs moving in. So we just kind of have to depend on sea breezes and outflow boundaries from previous thunderstorms that have collapsed somewhere else. So there aren't going to be a lot of those triggering mechanisms out there, but the best likelihood of seeing some of these thunderstorms will probably be in the parishes that do that back up to the Atchafalaya Basin. So you're talking about Avoyelles, St. Landry, into St. Martin. Even I would include Lafayette in this, Iberia, St. Mary, Iberville, and then points eastward from there. A beautiful day here at Orange Beach, though. Although I have seen some slightly gustier winds. We can see this wind coming in from the north here from Dauphin Island. You see the camera kind of shaking. You can see that there's some wind right there on the water there too. So I think there's some gustier winds there off to the east. And there is a front that's kind of in place, and they had some big thunderstorms in those areas during the day yesterday. But as you work farther to the west, things have become a lot more sunny, even though the atmosphere is considerably unstable. Again, east of us, we've got a front that's got that triggering mechanism, but out to the west, that ridge of high pressure is still really in control, and that's why we're not seeing a whole lot popping up. But if they do, and if they can break through, they can get pretty strong, some gusty winds and some locally heavy rain, at least briefly. They don't last too long, and they won't move too quickly. As far as boating, no issues out there today, other than maybe an isolated thunderstorm along the coast, but I think our inland lakes and waterways are going to be fine. And even in the offshore waters, you're talking about 1 foot seas, and in the far offshore waters, maybe 2 to 3. So even our friends that are working out on the platforms out there are going to be seeing a pretty decent day when it comes to some smooth seas. And as far as the radar is concerned, again, remember, we were seeing some of those windier conditions there over to around Dauphin Island. So you got a bit of a northerly breeze, an offshore flow right there. And there are some thunderstorms out in the offshore waters, but it's really this big ridge of high pressure that's still been kind of in control of our weather here in Acadiana, while you have a little bit of a trough here across the eastern half of the country. That's why we're talking about better chances for rain a little farther to the east. But as far as tropical weather, again, the Gulf, no issues out there. And as far as the East Coast, too, we don't have any fronts coming in. So there's a look at the Gulf. You can see those showers and thunderstorms there. Some of that is associated with some tropical moisture. Other parts of that kind of have to do with a frontal boundary that's draped over central parts of Alabama. And there's a bit more moisture there in the eastern part of the Gulf. And I'm also kind of noticing a little bit more moisture kind of coming up here toward the southwestern Louisiana coast. Again, we've got most of the ingredients to get some showers and thunderstorms going. We just need to be able to pull the trigger, and that just doesn't seem to be happening. You got a little bit more moisture down in the south, and then you got to see this bit of a trough there off the east coast is trying to get some of that moisture there over the eastern Gulf. But no issues down in the Bay of Campeche, no worries across the Yucatan Channel, or the northwestern Caribbean. Western Caribbean, bit of a wave moving onshore of Central America. That will not produce any tropical activity for the Caribbean. It might have a little better chance as the wave continues over into the Pacific. Got another wave that's over the eastern part of the Caribbean that's generating some showers and thunderstorms just west of the Caribbean islands, and that will continue to drift along the northern South American coast, probably be south of Jamaica sometime tomorrow when we revisit you on Friday. Now, the Atlantic is really where I think most of the action, and even though compared to a normal August, there's not a lot of action going on in the Atlantic at this point in time. A lot of times when you get to the third week in August, you might have 1, 2, even 3 to 4 named storms can be in the Atlantic basin all at the same time. And right now we've just got a handful of tropical waves that have been really impacted by wind shear, especially as they get closer to the Caribbean islands. And they've also been kind of choked out by the Saharan dust too. So that's why we haven't seen a lot of development there. Some of that is due to the El Nino season that we're in right now, and that El Nino does continue to strengthen. And we're going to look at those numbers a little bit farther down the road here in the show. But again, don't be surprised here, even though we've got a lot of tropical waves and we do have computer models that are starting to show some development here in about a week. That's really the end of the envelope there, but it's really more like 7 to 10 days. So we might be able to see some of these shadings coming back onto the tropical weather outlook in new issues of this particular product as we go into the weekend and maybe into next week too. But the global tropics hazard outlook does have at least some low-end chances for some development out in the Atlantic going into next week and on into the first week of September. And that actually, that week 3 there, leads us almost to the peak of the hurricane season, which is considered September the 10th. So let's look at the models. And we're going to combine the PWatts, which is the precipitable water, and that's just kind of the amount of moisture that's in the atmosphere, along with the surface map that shows where we can get some developing low pressure areas at the surface. Because remember, tropical systems develop very low, right on the ocean surface, lowest levels of the atmosphere. And then it's impacted by what goes on in the upper levels. It does have, it controls some of the steering, a lot of the upper levels do, but it also, that's where your wind shear issues are too. So it does come into play when it comes to development. But when we're looking at the Euro here, and remember the Euro, if you were with us yesterday, we were watching this little bit of a tropical wave that's right here that's kind of coming off of the African coast right now. The GFS has been kind of excited about that particular wave, while the Euro doesn't seem to be too interested, but I am starting to see some trends there. And as you see, as we get into the weekend, maybe a little bit of a low trying to develop according to the Euro model, which again is a little bit different than what we were looking at yesterday. It seems to be coming on board a little bit for that particular tropical wave, but then it just kind of fizzles out or stays something very weak by the time we reach about a week from today. It would be considered probably right about in here, and as we push it a little bit farther, you see it just kind of falls apart. But the moisture lingers as it moves here. By the time we get into next Saturday, you've got that. But then, of course, you're probably seeing this next one, kind of like what the GFS was showing yesterday, more of a parade of storms, while the Euro has this first wave that's coming off the African coast today, fizzling here over parts of the northeastern Caribbean. It does have another wave that's starting to pull out here into the Atlantic. And as we go a little bit farther out, let's just go out 10 days total. So as we get to 10 days, the Euro does have a tropical system there, several hundred miles east of the islands, but you're also probably going to notice that we've got the ridge of high pressure that's here over the eastern part of the Atlantic, and that's going to be pretty strong. And depending on if we get any trophiness here, again, I think it would probably round that. But if we don't get any trophiness over the Atlantic coast there, the east coast of the U.S., eastern provinces of Canada, then it might be able to shove its way a little bit farther to the west. But remember, this map right here is 10 days out from today, so that is really a long ways out. And a lot of changes are going to happen between now and then. So let's grab the GFS. This is a little bit more of a recent update on the model. So the Euro was the 0Z, so that we could take that all the way out to the 10th day. The GFS updates and goes out to 14 days for every single run. The Euro, every other run will go out to that 14 days, and then every other run will go out just to 144 hours, so a week. So you got to use both of these global models here, but this is the newest version of the GFS, and we can just pull this on through. And again, you've got that initial tropical wave that's coming off the African coast right now, and it also is kind of looking at that other wave that's about halfway across the Atlantic. But as we go through on this model, it looks like kind of like the Euro, that first one fizzles out perhaps right in here. But then also I want you to watch that second wave that just starts to come off of the African coast here about Tuesday of next week. So area I'm looking at is right about in here. So kind of similar to what we were seeing with the Euro model. And you get a bit of a low pressure area, although not nearly as strong as what the Euro model was suggesting. And it also has a much farther southward move, but it does stay just a tropical wave here as it moves into the southern islands. So there's a significant difference here between the two global models. You've got the Euro now, maybe in a little over a week, calling for a significant tropical system. Not anything, I shouldn't say significant, at least an organized tropical system, while the GFS is calling for something that gets torn apart. And then you've also got the different locations. You got the GFS that basically takes it down here to the southern part of the Caribbean, while the Euro had that low somewhere out here. So again, you got some big differences, but we would expect that as we get out to day 10. And in fact, that map that we're looking at right here with the GFS is beyond day 10. It's actually about 6 hours into day 10. So again, there's probably going to be a little bit more action out in the Atlantic over the next week or so, just based on the fact that we're finishing the month of August and heading into the month of September. But a real quick look, let's just go ahead and grab the Canadian and just see what it's showing. It's got that low kind of moving, and it looks like it's pretty similar to the GFS. That first wave, you see the blue there kind of moving over the islands. That would be the first wave. And then it looks like here we've got perhaps a secondary wave that's off toward the west that might have a better chance. But again, this is significantly different than the other two previous global models. So at this point, I can't say that we have a lot of agreement from models to model, from Euro to GFS to Icon to Canadian. But we have had some consistency on the GFS from model run to model run. So from the 12Z to the 0Z to the 6Z and on and 18 and so on, we have seen a little bit of consistency there. But still can't bite just yet. I think what we can just say is we are going to see a trend of maybe some busier times in the next 2 weeks or so. Now, there's a lot of Saharan dust that's still out there, although we're starting to see it retreating a little bit more. And the shear map is still pretty strong here, especially over the northeastern Caribbean and the far western Atlantic. And that's kind of why we've seen several of these other tropical waves as they get into that area. Shear has seemed to been pretty persistent in that particular location for the last several weeks. So if that continues to hold there, anything that kind of flows in that direction is really going to struggle when it comes to any kind of development. Now, fortunately, wind shear is a product of El Nino, and as you can see, look at the waters that are out here in the Western Pacific. They are just so super warm, and you kind of remember how we've gotten some of that warm water that's been impacting areas around Hawaii, where we had Hurricane Lala last week, or earlier this week rather. And so we've had a lot more activity over the Pacific than we have over the Atlantic. So in the Pacific, you end up with just a lot more warm water, which in turn can keep the tropical systems going. But over on the Atlantic side, it produces a lot more wind shear, and developing systems just can't get going in their early stages. And the index is still pretty high. It's at about 2.22 here today. And again, we've already peaked at 2.31, so we haven't moved into the number 3 spot just yet. But all of the forecast models for August and September do have a continual climb. It goes up and down just a little bit every day, but if you just kind of look at the general incline of that line, it has been pretty much going up in a steady fashion here all the way back since parts of May. So we're going to see that continue to climb likely. Now, that's some good news because it can help, again, to break apart developing tropical systems. And even though we've got maybe a little over 2 weeks, a little under 2 weeks of August left. I am looking ahead here to September, and this is where the breeding grounds are for tropical storms and hurricanes. It's also showing you where most of the tracks go. So in that deep red, as you can see during the month of September, if we get a lot of tropical systems to develop in the Atlantic, a lot of times they do curve around. Bermuda is usually in the crosshairs of these larger systems. The Gulf does tend to have some homegrown stuff, especially as we get toward the end of September. So that's why you get that little bit of an orange blob there south of Louisiana. Sometimes you might get a front that'll pull into the offshore waters and something can whip up from that front. So that's kind of why we see that there. And then, of course, the rest of the Atlantic coast is kind of under the gun during the month of September. And it really scales back to more of the Gulf and the Caribbean as we get into October and November. And the peak of the hurricane season is just a little over 2 weeks away. We were showing you in some of those computer models that it goes out to about September the 8th on the Tropical Weather Hazard Index, which goes out to the third week. So we are approaching the peak of the hurricane season, and this really should be very busy times in the Atlantic. But right now, with so much wind shear, we're just not seeing the numbers growing here during the month of August, which, of course, is always great news for anybody who lives along the coast here in the Atlantic Basin. Let's hope this holds, because I'm not a big fan of hurricanes. I know it can get me an extra click and maybe get me an extra view here and there, but after so many years and decades of what we've seen here in South Louisiana, last thing we want to deal with is another tropical storm or hurricane. Well, I hope you enjoyed Let's Talk Tropics. By the way, if you do like the video, subscribe to my channel and also turn on those notifications. And don't forget, you can catch my forecasts on TV again at WBRZ Channel 2. I'll be over there on Friday for Tune In, which starts at 5 o'clock in the morning. We go until 9 on WBRZ Plus. I do have a link below in the description if you don't catch Channel 2. It's a really fun show if you'd like to join us sometime. I'll also be there over the weekends, and I'll be on the noon show on Friday too, and that link will take you to all of those shows if you want. And of course, thanks to my followers on Facebook and X and all of my subscribers to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you on Friday, and we'll kick off the weekend.